Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Frank Sentner. Frank, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, I'm thrilled. It's good to see you, Aaron.
It is great to see you. It's always good to see, and I'm gonna preemptively strike your response. Both the Godfather of Insurance and the Grandfather of Insurance. And this time of year, as a young or not so young anymore Jewish kid from New York, the most lifelike Santa I've ever seen in my life from the moment I met you. So it's really an honor to have you take out of your busy schedule during this holiday season and sit down with me for a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. This is my favorite time of year.
I have a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to. For those who don't know, and I always encourage people to read the full bio that's in the show notes, but your influence, this podcast is a lot about hustling and how people evolve themselves. But I can say on a personal level, and this is not just to toot your horn, but I mean this seriously, me and my entire peer group consider you the Godfather. Whenever we think of ideas, a lot of things, it kind of is like, if I tell this to Frank, is he going to tell me that I'm an idiot? Which you never do, but you know what I mean. And I wonder if when you were earlier on in your career and in your life growing up, if you ever envisioned that, how does someone develop that, I don't want to say aura, but it's just that ability to influence others and to command a room?
Je ne sais quoi.
Exactly. And don't say it comes with age, because that's not true. Not everybody gets it. So it's not fair.
No, but there is an advantage to being in the same industry for an extended period of time. I'm coming up on 50 years in the insurance technology space, focused primarily, not exclusively, but primarily on the property and casualty insurance distribution side. And, when you've been in that space that long, you've met so many people and had the benefit of the wisdom of absolutely wonderful human beings who shared with me their wisdom, their knowledge, their experience. And you, at least for me, naturally have the inclination to want to share that with others. And so I think there's a natural metamorphosis if you've been mentored successfully, well, by people of goodwill and wisdom. There's a natural progression, I think, for you to take that forward and want to mentor others. And so it was for me a very natural progression when I reached the point in my career where, I was thankfully able to draw down on both my Social Security and the savings that Annette and I had managed to accrue, that I could pivot my consulting practice from fee for service to equity for service, so I could work with folks who were in the startup mode, which is my passion. Beyond Santa is my primary passion, but beyond being Santa, mentoring startups in the InsurTech space is what I love to do.
There's a lot that you said there to unpack, and there's some things that I wasn't even thinking about, but maybe an important question that everyone should think about when they listen to this podcast is, what is the best way for a younger person, it doesn't have to be just coming into their profession, to find, and this is going to sound like the wrong word, but endear themselves to a mentor? What I mean to say is, I am fortunate that you and I met through two different avenues. We worked with one company together, and then we're part of a group of individuals that come together as a mastermind. But so you're kind of forced to talk to me every once in a while. It just is what it is. I apologize, even if I don't give you cookies and sit on your lap. But the average young person, especially in a digital world, especially when I have found that very often people don't look for mentors because they feel like if the person who's ahead of me in my company cannot be my mentor, I can't look outside of that. And obviously outside of parents and things like that. But you said that one of your passions is mentoring younger people. And obviously then equity for service, things like that come along the way. But I imagine that when you meet a founder or someone who's seeking your advice, some people ingratiate themselves to you better than others. So what do you have any tips on that from the other side? What you look for in a mentee?
Well, I'm obviously an appreciation for what's being shared. I have had the experience as an advisor, an equity compensated advisor, I will add, of having my startup, mentees argue with me about the observations I make about themselves and their business and their target market, their product market fit, any number of issues, and refuse to take what advice I have to offer. That will not endear you to me or any other mentor.
Right.
And I'm not talking about not having a healthy discussion. You certainly need to have a healthy discussion, but if you're closed off to the possibility that you may learn something, then you're really not a good candidate for being mentored.
It's interesting you say that because my father, he should rest in peace, and I were involved at the beginning of, I don't know if it's probably I don't know if it's the most successful InsurTech because that's hard to tell, but a carrier in the InsurTech space that has gone public since then.
Yeah.
And we were not equity advisors, but I often reminded him that the reason why he agreed to even have a conversation with crazy people who wanted to turn, crazy young people who weren't going to listen to him, that wanted to turn the insurance space on their head, was that their attorney, who was his friend, told him that they would actually listen to him. Not in a commanding way, but he said, David, the one thing I can tell you about these people, you don't have to meet with them, but if you meet with them and you tell them their idea needs work in this direction or that direction, or that's never going to work, not legally, but because this and this, they'll at least be receptive to the criticism and continue the conversation. True. And I feel like a lot of people look for a mentor to be constantly positive and you can do this and stay at it. And every once in a while, aren't the greatest mentors the ones who tell you like, no, that's a huge mistake and I'm about to save you countless amount of money and hours by telling you that maybe you should have a different perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not hard to find people who will tell you you're right. It's more difficult to find people who will tell you where you may be off the mark and why and what you might be able to do to correct for that. And so there needs to be a dialogue. Mentoring is not a one-way street. I learn from every one of my startups. Mostly I'm learning about technology. Technology is evolving at such a rapid pace that, it's difficult for someone like myself, no matter how much reading you do, unless you're actually engaged in the process of implementing these technologies, unless you actually see the use cases to which they're being applied, it's difficult perhaps to understand them. And so I am fortunate that I'm constantly learning. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this so much. But there are lots of things that I've learned along the way that I also want to be able to share. And getting a second pair of eyes on whether it's your business plan, your UI, your underlying data structure, those are all things which, you should be willing to value.
Are you able to predict at this point? I totally was not going to ask this question, but I guess I'd have to. You obviously, I don't think you would take on a project that you didn't think was going to be successful, but are you able, once you get into that advisory role and have the initial, the first meeting or two or serious deep dive conversation with founders, have you developed that feeling for like this could be a success, or this is going to bomb. Like, this is just going to be a disaster. Did you see that earlier on now as the more experience you get?
Yeah, I mean, there are circumstances which are reasonably good predictors of people's future success. They're not deterministic by a long shot, but there are things that I've seen that help me to understand, and experience in my own life that help me to understand why someone might be successful or not. And I can give you some of them.
Please. This is the hustle. This is the ultimate hustle precursor. So we got it.
Yeah. Being an individual entrepreneur all by yourself, where you are the one who's coming up with the ideas, understanding your marketplace and potential customers, you're creating your products and designing what they look like, how they operate, the underlying technologies that they use, and also capable of running your business, keeping an eye on, the bottom line, managing personnel. I'm just listing some of the things that you need to do with any business, right? Doing that as a sole entrepreneur, founder, that's really, really hard. Most of the startups that I work with, the founders are more than one, and having two founders, pretty common, where you would have someone on the business side and someone on the tech side. But what I've discovered, and I discovered it relatively early in my career, was that the folks in the tech area and the folks in the business area, they don't speak the same language. And when they talk to one another, they frequently apply their own understanding of the words being used, the concepts being presented in their parlance, in their language. And so the real danger, the real challenge with a tech entrepreneur and a business entrepreneur as co-founders is that they think they understand one another, but they don't.
I see a book here. I see like tech entrepreneurs are from Mars and finance entrepreneurs are from Venus. I see a spin-off of some marriage counseling happening here, Frank, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, to be honest.
Well, it is a little bit like that. What I found that works really, really well is when you have someone who represents the business side and understands the domain space and knows how to run a business, and someone from the tech side who really understands how to build technology, design it, implement it for specific purposes. It's good to have a third party, an interlocutor, who understands the tech speak and also understands the business language. And that interlocutor becomes very, very important in helping to resolve the misunderstandings that naturally arise between founders when there's just two of them. Also, with two human beings, there's sort of always a certain amount of leveraging going on where one person wants the lead versus the other. With three, just like a three-legged stool, it stands a lot more firmly. And so there are things that you see that make you a little concerned about what the future of a given business will be. Now, I don't decide ahead of time that I'm not going to take on, a company as an advisor. If there's a reasonably good fit between, my understanding of the business space that they're in and the advantages of the technology that they're developing and their understanding of it, I'm happy to move forward with an individual entrepreneur. I have one of those right now, two of them actually in my portfolio of 11 companies. I have a couple of duos, one of them a married duo. There's probably nothing harder to do. You come from a family-owned business. But I will tell you, they're very successful at communication, at division of labor, at respecting one another's opinions. I mean, it's trying. I mean,
and by the way, my parents, my father's recipes, and my mother, she's living me well, said and they told me this many times. My wife is never coming to work in our business. You have nothing to worry about, Frank. But that the success only came when they really understood the division in that.
Yeah.
And so the irony, not to get into marriage counseling, is that arguably married couples actually know how to divide the labor best because they know the other person the best. Yet,
Yes.
very often that division doesn't happen in the workspace. And that's where things go south. But like, I know what my wife is very good with at home, and she knows what I'm very good at. So if we started a business, presumably, I would be the numbers guy and she would actually be the creative in that, right? So if we started
Mm-hmm.
but that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
What is it like when someone comes to you and you don't feel that their heart or head are in the right place, and that you can't, not that the business doesn't work. It's very easy to tell someone that their business isn't ready for an advisor or for an investment.
Mm-hmm.
But this show is about helping people learn more about themselves and therefore evolve themselves and their hustle.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like, and how do you handle the situation where you say this might be a decent idea or a good idea, but this person isn't ready? And you're not going to steal the idea, obviously. That's not what I'm saying. But the point I'm making is there a level of, I realize as the person who's done this many times before, that I need to, as the mentor, get the person right before the idea can ever take off, or else the whole thing might get derailed?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't, I have on 2 occasions out of about 15 relationships so far where I actually had equity in a firm. I almost always work with these firms as a mentor at no charge, with no equity or any agreement beyond, we schedule some phone calls. Because it's very important for me to get to know the people that I'm potentially going to be working with. And it's very important for them to get to know me, to understand if there's value there that they're willing to invest in. Because really, when you're giving someone equity in exchange for advice, you're investing in them. And so that period of time where I work with people and provide them with advice, where there's no commitment on either side, is really how I determine if it's something that we will be successful going forward. So in the first case, I had 2 entrepreneurs who gave me equity instantly. Okay. They did it based on a phone call. One of them I've never met in person. Okay. And which isn't all that unusual these days, but they sent me a contract for equity, based on a phone call and a referral. And I accepted it, because I had a really good feeling about that initial phone call. But that's very rare. In most cases, it takes time to build that relationship and for people to determine that they want to make that investment.
I'm going to tread lightly or carefully on my next question, although I don't really have to. But this is how do you handle the evolving? You said it isn't all that uncommon these days not to meet someone and work with them. I imagine that when you started, those words coming out of your mouth would have been unconscionable, right? So, but what's interesting about you in particular and the way that you've evolved your hustle, at least from my perspective as a fortunate mentee, is like nobody thinks that Frank is the old guy who's been doing this for 50 years. You know what I mean? And I guess that might be because you've always been on the forefront of tech, but there's always that like, oh, when my mom gets a new phone, we know that it's going to be terrible for a few days because she got a new phone. And that's not meant disrespectfully. It's just like I get a new phone, I pick it up, I can kind of mess with it, and God knows what my kids are going to do when they start with this
Right,
stuff.
exactly.
But yet, like you found a way to stay in that. Is that just because you've always been in the tech space, or because people are constantly coming to you with ideas? Is that a conscious thing?
Well, I mean, for me, it goes back to when I was very young. I started reading science fiction when I was, in single digits. And it was something that I was passionate about and have continued. I still read science fiction. I am always looking for the next opportunity, the next shift. And, life has moved along from my perspective at a pretty leisurely pace. I expected much greater change much more quickly. And so when I first meet people and begin to talk to them, I offer, my insights, my opinions. And in most cases, I'm predicting that there will be change on an order of magnitude greater and in a time period far shorter than the people I'm talking to, regardless of how old they are. Okay. So that perspective, that anticipation of change and welcoming of change, that, desire to see the world leap forward comes out in even my earliest conversations with people. So they're not surprised that I'm well read about their particular type of technology, or that I've thought about how it might be applicable in our business space. Nothing in the insurance business moves as quickly as I would like to see it move.
One of my questions was going to be, how does it feel to be the guy who's been in the part of the business for the longest, that's been saying for the last 50 years that we're only 2 years away from X?
Oh my Lord. When I first joined the first company selling computer systems, which only did accounting at that point, to insurance agents, one of the older sales reps said to me, "Don't get too comfortable. These guys are going away soon." And would you like to know what was going to get rid of agents in 1976?
The Jetsons.
Direct bill.
Yes. My father said that all the time. I started working in the firm full-time 2010. Our business was like 80% agency bill. And when I kept moving over to direct, and I said, we got to move to direct. Well, this is insane. I'm not even talking about wasting the money on postage. It just makes no sense. He's like, the only way we stay relevant, the only way we stay top of mind is by agency bill. I'm like, Dad, that's not happening. And we didn't take credit cards. It was horrible. But it's funny that you say that. I just, I every time I speak to you and I see you or I see what you're doing, I just feel like that so many people underestimate how people can evolve their careers, how people can start in one place and not jump. You never jump to a different part of to a different industry or a different part of the industry, but it's just a little right turn and then another little degree right and then another step forward, another degree, and all of a sudden you end up somewhat far from where you started, but it's all been the same and it's all been incremental. And I find it amazing that you would say that there's still some people that were wrong earlier on and that you can still say that. And that means that there's more people that are wrong now. So I guess I appreciate that as an agent with no plan B.
I wouldn't say wrong. I would say, that their anticipation or actually their present understanding of the value proposition for the independent agent was flawed. Okay. Their assessment that the only way agencies made money was on the float, for agency bill, was what made them assume that agents would go out of business if they didn't have that float. You can, oh my goodness, there's so many points at which I've heard that independent agents were going to disappear. And, my point, whenever someone brings that up to me, when they use the term disintermediation, I say to them, okay, but disintermediation doesn't get rid of the person closest to the customer.
Exactly.
Okay? The person closest to the customer remains part of the equation. There's somebody else further up the food chain who may be disintermediated, okay, but it's not going to be an independent agent. And as long as agents keep doing what they've done as successfully as they've done, I saw a presentation by Marsh Berry, and in it they did a chart over the last 40 years of the earnings for independent insurance agents relative to, and they had it superimposed on the chart, the earnings for the insurance carriers during the same period. And the independent agents' earnings were relatively static, rising slightly over time, no big dips, no craters, and the carriers were all over the map.
That's
all
right.
over. Sometimes they out earned the agents big time. A lot of times they earned a lot less. And that's part of the reason why the multiples are being paid for independent insurance agencies, because they're guaranteed winners.
We try. Okay, I have one more question before we close up, and that is, as the grandfather of insurance and the godfather of insurance and the super advisor that you are, what was it like when you got the phone call the first time that one of your children / children companies, in the space, was getting to an exit? What was it like when you got that phone call and they were like, Frank, this actually happened, we're exiting?
Well,
because that's what, by the way, that's the difference. The problem in the InsurTech space, I don't mean problem, is that insurance people like you and like me, we think about doing this forever. Tech startup entrepreneurs think about an exit. So when they say that's their ultimate success, you and I may have different versions, right? We would say, make a consistent income for the next 50 years and we'll be happy. Pay me a few dollars every year. But when you were there, you were the advisor, and then you get the call like, hey, we've hit our dream success. What is it like?
I've had this experience, fortunately, once, and it was Tarmika, and Raghav and Geeta had built a terrific company. They hit the mark in terms of the timing, which is the most difficult thing to predict. And by timing, I mean the timing of the marketplace. Okay. They came out with a comparative rater. They prefer a placement system, that was focused on small commercial just at the point in time when the hard market was really starting to hurt. And agents, I've seen them adopt the comparative rating technology in waves. And it always, in the commercial line space, comes when there's a hard market in commercial lines. And as the market hardened, they got more and more traction. Now, Raghav and Geeta were different stages of their lives. Raghav has a young family, and Geeta was looking to try to retire. And, in less than 2 years, they went from startup to exit.
I love it. I love Rags. Rags has got to be on the show. You know what? I got to get Raghav on the show.
Oh, you got to get him on. Okay. I've never seen it before. Okay. And the people who came knocking, and actually they had an offer. A lot of people don't know this from Vertafore before they got an offer from Applied. They turned down the offer for Vertafore, and myself and others, had advised them not to take the offer from Vertafore. It was too early. When Applied came knocking, they took the offer. They called us and said, we want to take the offer because of the time of life. Raghav didn't want to be putting in all these hours, and it takes a lot of hours to build a startup, with a young family, and Geeta wanted to move on. And they had the perfect acquirer. Most of the comparative raters that I know that have been acquired during my career were acquired by agency management system vendors. And the one with the deepest pockets made them the best offer. Okay. So my initial reaction was, you realize if you waited a little longer, you could probably get more money. And they both said, we want to do this. Okay. And so they successfully exited. Geeta has moved on. Raghav has stuck with it, and he's loving it. So I think it comes down to the value of the exit for the entrepreneurs. It's their business. My job is to try to give them some, especially in that moment, some insight into the bigger picture. And if the bigger picture is something that is compelling for them, they may decide to wait. But if it's not, they're going to make the move. And I honestly could not be happier for both of them. It's been a wonderful, wonderful outcome. And, I wish them all the very best.
I love it.
And by the way, I wasn't unhappy at all with the checks that I got. So
there you go. I'm waiting for one with you too one day, I hope. We ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational and inspirational quote, what it means to them. Frank, thank you again for being here. Grandfather, Godfather, Santa, everything in between. Getting to just spend some time and hear your insight means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to our listeners. So I thank you again for being here, and the floor is yours for your favorite motivational, inspirational quote.
Well, I'd like to quote, one of my personal heroes, and that is the Dalai Lama. And this is probably one of his best quotes. Happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. That is
correct.
An interesting take on karma.
and those actions, some might say your own hustle, your own mindset, your own lifestyle, and making sure that your focus is always correct. So thank you again for being here, Frank.
Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.